All right, so let's talk about mastheads. So, as I mentioned in the previous video, the masthead is the name of your magazine. The little deck, the Ultimate Asian Film Magazine, or the Biggest Movie Magazine. I keep using the word magazine. There are other slogans and magazine decks that are there. But right now, we're going to focus primarily on what the name of your magazine is going to be. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly like this, but you'll notice that there is some commonality. They're really big, so you can actually see it from a distance. And it's also in the top portion of your magazine, because if magazines are stacked on top of each other, it's the name that usually pops out at the top. So the rest of the cover might actually be covered, might be obscured. So with this, what you're going to do is it is one of the most important parts of the magazine. So you want to make sure that you take some time to develop some variations of this so you can come up with something that actually looks really powerful and stands out from other people's. You're going to be creating 5 or 6 variations or more of your magazine masthead today. So with this, the college does want us to do some kind of manipulation to the masthead. Now, technically, they want us to use Illustrator, which we'll come back later and we'll swap it out. But for now, since we've been using Photoshop, I want to go ahead and stick with that and have you create your variations as well as your final masthead in Photoshop. Then we'll swap it out eventually. So again, here's an example of how the masthead's being used in this particular magazine that I like. But the idea of changing the masthead is really nebulous. It's kind of, the college didn't really give us a lot of details to go on. So based on my experience from designing mastheads, as well as turning stuff into the college, I want to show you some things that you may try to work with in creating your masthead. And then I'll show you some tips and tricks inside of Photoshop to be able to make further manipulations. So here's a couple things. Now, these are not the only things you can do, but these are 3 of the most common things that I've seen that have been successful. First one is doing something to cut up the letters somehow, doing something to adjust the kerning. Now, that's why I had you do the kerning game. There was a purpose behind that, not just to torture you with points. I wanted you to be able to get used to how to look at a set of letters next to each other and put an even amount of space between them, or be able to pull things closer. I'll show you some other tricks and tips inside of Photoshop in the future video. The other thing is that you're going to modify or potentially add to the letters. Now, feel free to try all of these. Feel free to mix them together, and then also feel free to try your own things at it and see what you can come up with. Remember, by doing these different iterations, the whole point is it's not about not enough, too much. It's about eventually falling into just right for the Goldilocks point. So here's an example of cutting letters. So I started out with the first one with CinemaScope at the top, and then running through and actually masking out those individual lines. So it was just taking that Cinema font, putting a mask on top, and then using the rectangle marquee, running it straight across and hiding those particular parts of the letter. Could be one way. Here's examples of ones actually used in mastheads. So you can see it could be something as simple as just clipping off portions of the letter. Now that can be done using masks, but it can also be done converting it into a shape. And that's a thing I haven't shown you before. So I'll record a separate video that shows you how to convert text into a shape that you can then manipulate. So those are examples, kind of like this one here with Fader, how they're using the empty space, the negative space, to be able to create the appearance of the letter A and E. This is a thing called gestalt. It's a really interesting psychological effect that your brain is seeking out a pattern. You can adjust the kerning significantly by pulling the text closer to each other. So it's modifying it from the existing way that the spacing was set up. You can also add in additional letters. Notice here with Millennium, all they did was just add in a little box to connect some of the letters. So adjusting the actual kerning, but then also just throwing in a little bit of a shape. So the idea is we want this to not just be an out-of-the-box font, one that is already made, you just type it in and you go. You want to be able to make some kind of form of manipulation to the actual text. You can modify or add to the letters, One of the things that I like with this is kind of the mixture of the uppercase with an extended lowercase and then playing around with the smaller text here. I like the way that looks. Adding on additional shapes to an existing font and modifying it slightly. So it was just a matter of extending this out. It wasn't really a complicated shape, but it definitely makes it much more unique, almost like a logo, as opposed to just choosing a font and typing. And then even doing something as simple as this. Notice the way that the S was constructed here probably did not end exactly at that angle, but by putting this box on top of this with the same color as the background, what's happened is it gives off the illusion that that has actually been cut. It's possible that they did actually split the letter. If that's something you want to do, let me know and I'll show you how to do that. So those are three possible ways of doing it. You could do other things to it. So experiment. This is the point of trying quite a few different variations. So your assignment is going to be choose one of your names or two and make a minimum of 5 variations doing some form of modifications to it. You're going to be turning that in on a single PSD file, and you're going to be turning it in as a Photoshop document. The reason I want a Photoshop document is I might be able to go in and make some adjustments or tweak it a little bit and give you some feedback based on some of the variations that you've made. And you'll be turning that in as a PSD file by midnight tonight. Here's some examples. This is for a heavy metal magazine, some variations that are set up. Notice that some of it is font-based. Some of it is going in and actually converting things to shapes and extending letters, changing this around, pulling some stuff down. So you're going to be making variations like this. Another example. Other example. Now, with things like this, I would avoid throwing the word magazine in sometimes. I mean, it seems to be an easy go-to, but after a while, it just becomes redundant. So I would, if possible, avoid it. If it's the only thing you can think of, I'm okay with that for now, but let's see if we can try to avoid using that as the magazine deck. Another example. So that is what you're going to be creating for today. You're going to choose one or two of the names that you have created for your magazine, and you're going to experiment. You can do way more than 5. Trust me, it's very fast to be able to create, just finding different fonts to use and then going in and starting to manipulate the actual text itself can be really fun and interesting.